The Ministry of Timelines bears no official responsibility for the content of this research. The apparent nature of the signal supports the proposed hypothesis that a temporal incursion is present within this timeline. All non-essential agents have been evacuated from this timeline, and a chronal suture will be completed if necessary. In the murky back corridors of power, the Commonwealth finally translated the signal it had received long ago, before they had ever left the Sol system. The signal was paradoxically being broadcast simultaneously from the past and the future. It spoke of a coming time when the galaxy will be plunged into darkness, and was filled with other foreboding messages. The future part of the signal also carried a message from the last survivors of a coming crisis they called the Contingency. They had been defeated despite having received a similar warning, when a shadow group within had attempted to build some sort of engine, the battle for which had weakened the Commonwealth when the Contingency first emerged. As the message began to describe the nature of this group, the signal unfortunately became corrupted, the details unable to be recovered. As a direct consequence, Intelligence Unit MI-21 was formed to seek out this shadowy organisation. The Commonwealth also received information on the makeup of the Contingency's forces and a vaccine of sorts for the digital ghost signal. In the galaxy at large, the year 2288 started with a momentous occasion. The first non-human governor was appointed in the Greater Commonwealth, cementing the egalitarian tenets of that nation. Governor Austin Forksin, a refugee Hufwa, took over after the previous governor was ousted for corruption. Humanity's government made a major shift in the next year, 2289. They chose to focus on the crafting of masterful buildings, devices and artifacts, and upgraded those currently in existence. Through what was called an oversight in the legislation, hundreds of millions of people were kicked out of the buildings to be upgraded. And having so many people suddenly become unemployed, the economy of course collapsed. This oversight was corrected and the human economy prospered once more, mostly thanks to the discontinuity of employment, meaning that employers didn't need to provide benefits to those hundreds of millions anymore. A Greater Commonwealth Navy, separate to the Ocean Limited Royal Navy, was officially created by an Act of Parliament, giving more power to the Royal Geographical Society, and supreme command to the King. King Montgomery gracefully accepted the figurehead role and delegated official duties to a yes-man, Lord Edward of the Knightly Order of Bushido. Lord Edward solemnly accepted the position of Supreme Admiral of the RGS, stepping down from Parliament. He later gave a speech saying that commanding the entire space fleet was a bit like riding a bike, isn't it? What? May God help us all. In the Pandil system, on the border of Cartel space, the Great Pacifica Defense Fleet engaged in fleet exercises in an attempt to scare and intimidate the cartel. They instead angered the cartel, who demanded the fleet withdraw at once. The humans pretended not to hear and claimed subspace storms in the system were causing issues with their sensors, before whistling and humming into the microphone and quickly hanging up. King Montgomery gave a speech to the galactic community in 2292. Although it was initially met with doubt by the Codronite Cartel and the Drake Empire, the task managers used it to propose the unification of the galaxy under a single federation. The king asked the other empires not to tell their citizens, seemingly unaware of the pan-galactic broadcast agreement that was in place. Mr. Smith proposed that the Drakes and the cartel target only non-conforming empires, before asking what good is a phone call if you're unable to speak, which only baffled both delegates, who hadn't asked for a phone call, or knew what a phone was. The Cardew were elated to hear about their friends working together towards a common goal, and were subsequently invited to the Great British Managers. Parliament was able to listen to the broadcast in the top secret discussion room, reserved for discussions about the signal, and they found the speech exceptionally moving, reinvigorating Parliament's hope and trust in the monarchy. This speech was, of course, a plea by the Commonwealth to the greater galactic community in the hopes of unifying the galaxy against the ghost signal and the contingency. Unfortunately for the greater Commonwealth, other than the local powers, that being the Codronite Cartel, the Order of the Drake, the Task Managers and the Cardew Collective, the galaxy at large dismissed their claims entirely. Despite the King's powerful speech, the Codronite diplomat still doubted the nature of the impending threat before being reminded of the diplomatic package currently sat on their desk bearing big red repeating letters spelling evidence. An agreement was made to keep this crucial information out of public knowledge for several more decades at least, by keeping it on the Codronite diplomat's desk. Although the cartel tried to leverage their agreement by being permitted to open branch offices across the galaxy. Mr. Smith intervened, arguing for the Codronites and Order of the Drake to make concessions for the galaxy because of economic differences. As the argument escalated, Mr. Smith was said to utter, "Never send a human to do a machine's job." Thankfully, the Cardew intervened, giving a simple and beautiful speech about friendship and love. The innocence and eloquence of the speech entranced Parliament during their daily coffee-sipping session so greatly that it was immediately decided to invite the Cardew into the Federation. Rumours persisted afterwards that most of Parliament was in tears for days and reportedly watching classical romance films. Despite seeing progress in this proposed alliance, the Codronites, behind closed doors, had other plans in mind. Only a year later, a shocking, leaked video showed King Montgomery I of the Greater Commonwealth threatening Codronite diplomats, shouting, "Come and obtain an unspecified amount if you're made of enough rigid matter." It followed a discovery by Commonwealth intelligence that the Codronites were attempting to create a megastructure of unknown use around their home star. The King's scandalously strong words referred to unfounded claims of the structure being created to cause destruction. The alarming decision made by the Codronite cartel to begin etherophasic technology research was condemned by the Allies in a diplomatic meeting between the cartel, the task managers and the Greater British Commonwealth. In response, the Codronites demanded that the task managers cease their expansion into Codronite space via the Adib wormhole, formally stating that "we will have words" should the task managers continue their territorial aggression. The following year saw the raiding fleet sent by the Sid Martin freebooters begin bombarding and abducting citizens from New Ireland. Many robots moved there during the Great Unemployment Crisis were included in the abductions, accidentally reuniting two units who had served together on a diplomatic vessel but had split after a minor disagreement about which direction to go in. Following the leak of a parliamentary bill draft in 2294, rumours of giant extraterrestrial ants spread throughout the Commonwealth. Raid stocks surged and xenophobic Dave re-enlisted to go on a bug hunt. But the excitement died down when it was eventually learned that the Admiralty had not been mobilised to destroy insect-infested planets, only that His Majesty King Montgomery had simply deigned to name a newly discovered celestial object as Deant Sphere. Pirates fled the Trin's Promise system after seeing the might of the new human navy, escaping the system with their plunder from New Ireland just before the human fleet could catch up with them. The fleet commander, however, would not be disgraced and stormed full speed in pursuit. The pirates would have escaped to Task Manager space were it not for Dantor Calrus, head of the Pacifica Defense Fleet, hero of many human wars, who manoeuvred ahead of the rest of the fleet and caught the pirates in fact. Separated from the other fleets and outnumbered 2-1, Dantor's tactics and the superiority of the ship designs defeated the entire pirate armada for the loss of a mere 2 vessels, a monumentous victory for the Greater Commonwealth. The Cardu were invited in late 2295 to a dinner party by the task managers and the Greater Commonwealth, with a view to inviting them into their federation finally. After a lovely introduction, the Codronite Lord unexpectedly interfered at the last moment, offended by the Cardu's joining with the Federation. After another rousing speech, the Codronite diplomat offered to join a co-federation with the Federation. The confusion and anger would later be attributed to the Codronite not being familiar with Earth's alcoholic spirits, who went on to earnestly introduce the Cardu to anime. The Codronite was quietly escorted home before things got too tentacular. The Sol 2 talks occurred in late 2297. Task Manager King Steve summoned the Commonwealth and Cardu to Sol 2 to discuss the Order of the Drake, as long as they were able to keep an eye to the Order of the Drake's campaign of war in the Galactic East. There were numerous debates concerning the renaming of the Federation, derailed somewhat to anime addiction after Steve accidentally referred to it as a four-way. King Montgomery, preferring his Tolkien to Shiro, proposed the Council of Four. Steve and Cardu were satisfied with the suggested name and agreed to put it through to the Order of the Drake. August 2298, and the Order of the Drake proposed the Council of Four join a war of vassalization against the Machine Empire Research Project 04 in the Galactic North. Parliament voted in favour, despite King Montgomery's questioning the war's morality. His Majesty graciously acquiesced on learning of the Machine Empire's hobby of skull collection. Later that year, the King started a grand diplomatic campaign to claim the Beryllian system on the advice of the Deputy Prime Minister. The Cardu placed almost their entire diplomatic weight into the galactic community, only to be emotionally moved when the King read out a heartfelt letter written by a citizen of the planet Sally trapped within the Cardu's space. Its sorrow too great for the Cardu to handle, they then relinquished the system to the Greater Commonwealth. But perhaps it was all a ploy, the letter a fake written by Parliament. The King might have even slipped up during diplomatic communications with the Cardu, accidentally saying insert name when the girl's name had not been properly copied throughout the letter. A novice error, and one that would never have been made by a professional, yet it somehow still did not backfire. Instead, insert name soon became the most popular baby name within the Commonwealth. Pause for laughter. January 2299. After a dispute in the Onar Patch between the Order of the Drake and the Research Project 004, a series of defensive alliances inadvertently ignited tensions in the galaxy. As the Council of Four mobilized against the greater galaxy to quell this robotic menace, and empires rallied to defend the robotic menace from the Council of Four. The First Galactic War had begun. Revealing inadequacies in the human intelligence network, many hidden pacts and treaties were activated by the Council of Four's War Declaration on Machine Empire Research Project 04. In an oversight of galactic proportions, those not within the Council of Four declared war in return. A split was created in the galaxy between those who signed the Ghost Signal Accord and those who did not. The galaxy began to burn, mankind burning with it. In a somewhat oblivious act, the Cardu offered a trade of consumer goods to the Commonwealth. The goods included Cardu license plates, a Cardu-branded galactic board game simulator, and an anime titled Cardu in a Magical Galaxy with an AWE asset, in which every character was played by genetically incutified Cardu. The need to prepare to defend the galaxy against the predicted contingency was weighed against the need to improve humanity's ability to inhabit artificial habitats in space in a heated parliamentary debate. It was ultimately decided to defer the defence of the galaxy in favour of becoming voidborn. This was in order to prevent the still secret information of the contingency becoming public. It's still 100 years away, that's someone else's problem, was the pervasive sentiment from members of a parliament forgetting that they had made themselves essentially immortal. To achieve the vision of becoming voidborn, Parliament shifted focus to space habitation. The habitation dealt with rampant unemployment and consumer goods losses, the Cardu license plates simply not having driven the economic upturn expected, and provided opportunity that many entrepreneurs used to their advantage. habitat-based banks being excellent tax havens. Ironically, due to the severe lack of consumer good production, the newly acquired building space could not easily be used to focus on other things like research. Deemed to have been allowed to exist for far too many decades, the Pacifica Defense Fleet engaged the infestation within the Sulan system in June of 2302. As the destruction of the bugs at the risk of human losses showed a shift within the government, permitting human fleets to be used more across the galaxy. The commander of the Pacifica Defense Fleet denied they had only sent xenophobic Dave out with a jetpack and a spiked stick. Citizens of planet Morris then grew frustrated over the constant overhauling of their planetary infrastructure due to lazy bureaucratic decisions made at the highest levels. This saw their industry flip-flop between alloy production and consumer goods production, and then back to alloy production in a short period of time. They flipped one last time, giving a massive industrial finger to the bureaucrats, when they settled on making metallic dice in general and exotic alloys for D&D nerds. Their depleted uranium D20s also served as ammunition should the bureaucrats try to interfere further. Rumours spread in late 2303 that the mysterious individual Mr. Smith had tried to return legal status to the vile profession of clerks. Despite his obvious contempt for the Constitution, almost half of Parliament foolishly voted for this borderline treasonous resolution. To prevent further attempts, emergency powers were provided to King Montgomery I. When asked why he was laughing with megalomaniacal glee, the king said he was reminded of a joke he heard that morning, but which he was then unable to recollect for Parliament at large. The king's first act with this new authority was to create a grand army of the Commonwealth, exclusively composed of AWEs, a future echo of the signal of the contingency and its potential to take over synthetic life forms perhaps. Members of the ARP were merely ecstatic about the news of Toasty being elected to serve as the first AWE general, despite his lacking key features of sapience like opposable thumbs. December 2304. Member of Parliament Agro Bernard called for a vote of no confidence in King Montgomery. The vote was very close, split 52% to 47%. However, for the first time in the history of the Greater British Commonwealth, the vote was in favour of the noes. A leader of government did indeed survive a vote of no confidence. Known as a fierce opponent of clerks, King Montgomery was pushed by public demand for employment and job opportunities towards incentivising the job he long opposed. He caved to public pressure to focus on mercantile policies in early 2305. Later that year, King Montgomery shifted the Commonwealth trade policy towards consumer goods acquisition, having finally finished setting up infrastructure for a mixed development of consumer goods and alloys. The citizens of Morris were outraged to have to rebuild once more into a pure alloy focus, rendering redundant their previous mixed production redundancies. At least, that was their public stance. In private, they didn't give a fig, and continued production of alloy dice sets, knowing that D&D nerds never could have too many dice. By emergency decree, in late 2309, the king demanded that AWEs be shipped between various worlds to find gainful employment, in order to further stabilise the economy. But when a Bahia community on Trin's Promise Prime was forced at gunpoint to board transports destined for the backwater habitat of Michael's Cottage, it sparked outrage among many Parliament members. The transport chief, xenophobic Dave, insisted the letter of the decree was being followed, and pointed to the section stating that any inorganic life was subject to forced relocation. The king initially claimed there had been a clerical error, but was forced to accept that the relocation was legitimate because the Bahia were not human, ignoring it being a flagrant violation of the Commonwealth's constitution. Almost as if to celebrate his contemptible behaviour, King Montgomery egotistically renamed the shortly thereafter completed Ecumenopolis of Trin's Promise Prime to Montgomery's Victory. Critics suggest that the lithoids weren't fit to see the fruits of their hard labour in the king's eyes. King Montgomery went on to rename Trin's Promise Prime to Montgomery's Victory, and the system from Trin's Promise to Monty's Promise. nobody noticed the spelling error in the new Ecumenopolis' name for nearly a year, partly owing to the extended, exuberant celebrations, but mostly because the job of clerk was illegal. It was eventually noticed, however, and the error corrected. The planet, thankfully, was no longer called Montgomery's Victory. City rezoning soon followed, an act that was not fully understood until completed, and nighttime, when a continental-sized neon image of Montgomery's face lit up the dark skies. This was celebrated with citizens displaying their own icons of the king in their windows, generally on the outside of blinds and blackout curtains, or going to live in the city's underlayers, where bootleg copies of Cardu Isekai continued to be distributed. The king continued the work of the empire by sending off stolen alien artifacts, or the Montgomery Marbles as he called them, on an exhibition tour across the nation to celebrate diversity. The message was understood to say that diversity in the Commonwealth was fine as long as it was human-led diversity. While the king was distracted by his emergency powers, a new prime minister was chosen, Lady Penelope, incidentally, the top-only Xenos content creator from the Applied Rationality Party. The ARP celebrated the result by consuming vast quantities of toasty toast. In 2312, the Greater British Commonwealth replaced the Cartel as a member of the Galactic Council, under the mighty leadership of the Great King Montgomery. A year later, the Commonwealth planned to clear out the barbarian marauders on the border of the task managers. They mostly wanted to test the military capabilities of their new ship designs, and were happy to find a universally acceptable target. The long dream of humanity was finally realised as Mars was terraformed into a Gaia-class planet, making it more hospitable to human life than Earth. Colonists flocked to the planet for a fresh start in the very heart of the Commonwealth. God bless this amazing king and all these things he does. The first attack waves arrived to confront the Marauder home systems in August 2315, and by the middle of November in the same year, the Marauder home system had been annihilated. No one had survived. Billions were dead. An accurate death toll unimaginable. The news reported that pirates had been wiped out for the good of the Greater Commonwealth. Parliament debated researching new megastructures, the loss unnoticed by these elites. The ship designers high-fived until their hands hurt, which for engineering nerds was after approximately one high-five, roundest to the nearest significant figure of course. The genocide of the Marauders did not go entirely unnoticed. In 2317, the last remaining citizens of the Marauders banded together in what they knew was a futile attempt to strike back at the butchers of their people, but one that was deeply symbolic. The siege of Wentworth lasted approximately 6 months before they were defeated by local system defences. In that 6 months, the Commonwealth expanded to fill the unoccupied Marauder space, relegating the proud warrior culture to a historical footnote. Earth then became a Gaia world in 2319, the secret terraforming project by the King having completed. The Green Party was, for the first time in history, happy. Lady Penelope was re-elected as Prime Minister in the general election of 2320, and there was much rejoicing. The task managers attempted to convince the great powers of the galaxy to make them galactic custodian. The summit was held in the mostly complete task manager interstellar assembly, orbiting a planet they designated New Earth. Participants were put off by the constant sounds of construction work, which continually interrupted discussions. After a private aside with King Montgomery, the Commonwealth then approved the motion. And later that same year, conspiracy paper The Auditors published notes about a possible toxic god sighting. Back in the murky corridors of power, which looked suspiciously like some sort of ancient Discord server, the king refused to give up his emergency powers in order to root out the Shadow Council. He announced this to the public, who supported his actions, thanks to his success with the economy and the war effort. MI-21 was implicated in a financial scandal, with members of the group misappropriating funds to spend on clothes, gifts, wet celery club attendance, and moat maintenance. Lady Kayla and Lady Paradox were also revealed as members of MI-21. Following that, a series of unlikely events occurred in Parliament. These started when laughter was heard in the House of Commons, and culminated when a speech was given to the House of Lords in the dead of night, even though the House was empty and there was no one talking. The speech warned that the Morning Star would be released from his cage on the coming Friday. Friday came, and Venus exploded. The explosion lit up the night sky of Earth, and RGS sensors detected an apparent trace of something leaving the system at hyperluminal velocities. This concludes our analysis of the immediate post-signal era. Please refer to the next chapter of this report for further details on the Commonwealth timeline.